when you are drinking wine, you have almost an infinity of possibility. You can drink red, you can drink rosé wine, you can drink sparkling, you can drink white wine, then you can drink dry or sweet wine, then you can drink wine from all over the world, and all of those will actually be totally different. The many possibilities actually make it really interesting to try to find the best wine to drink. I think the other reason on the winemaker side is kind of the easiness to make wine. To make wine, you just need grapes and you need something to ferment the grapes. And then you can do pretty much everything you want. And that's why there is so many differences. But the main principle, the main technique to make wine is actually really simple. So it's spread all over the world because it's easy and it's actually good for everybody, and more and more people like it.
You're making a book that somebody reads every day. Somebody in this state and on the East Coast too is drinking, and I figured it out, they've got to be drinking X amount of bottles a day or I wouldn't be in business. So they're drinking a part of you and what you're doing in your life. So that's sort of a unique thing that I think is kind of cool. It's a laid back, except when we're bottling like that. You saw that. That's, we bottle maybe 25 days out of the year. Because I'm not a big winery, and because I own the deal with my partner, Lubbock National Bank, you know, we can do certain things that we don't have to answer to people. Like you saw the wine we were bottling today, the Vino Verde, the Verde Verde. We did that on a whim. We can do that, stuff like that all the time. My Albarino vineyard got hailed out, except half of it didn't. And so we took and made lemonade out of the lemons.
If you think about the first guy who made wine maybe like 8,000 years ago, obviously the guy didn't know anything about fermentation or how to make wine. Basically, we can think that he just harvested some grapes, kept it in some small skin bags, and then he crushed it without paying attention and started fermenting. I guess he tried it, and the first reason that he liked it was obviously because he got drunk. He didn't know. We didn't know at the time that it was alcohol, but for then hundreds of years, the importance of wine was actually because it was making you drunk, and that's it. The real taste and the importance of the taste of wine, it comes only from Greece and Italy, so around 2,000 years ago, and that's when it started really developing as a really fancy product. People started writing about the different taste of wine, how to pair it with food and everything. So that's the time it really became important as a product for everybody and not just something to get you drunk.
Let's just say Sangiovese, okay? In 1984, my dad first planted it. I would have to brown bag that in restaurants when you were presenting it to sell, because, you know, they wouldn't believe it was from Texas, okay? Finally, I've overcome that. And so Sangiovese is now made by several wineries. We still come up on that thing, quality-wise. A lot of restaurants, there's been a lot of wines out there, they go, no, I'm not doing a Texas wine.
This is still a really new, a really young area for wine. There has been wine a lot before Prohibition. Then it stopped, obviously, during Prohibition. Well, it officially stopped, but there was still a lot going on, I guess. But then it became again to be an important thing starting in the 70s or 80s. So yeah, around 30 years of history, which is really young compared to where I'm coming from in France, where most of the areas have hundreds and hundreds, maybe sometimes thousands of years of history. So actually that could be a bad thing, say, okay, it's just a young thing and it's gonna pass, but actually that's a pretty good thing because there is a lot to do. and there is a lot of potential for the Texas High Plain and actually all the Texas area. So that's really a good place to be when you want to work with wine.
Every year, I told my assistant winemaker, we're going to do something kooky and wild, goofy, crazy. And I might only do 200 cases of it. It'll go through my wine club, but I'm going to do it. It's just like the Vino Verde, the Verde Verde. I said, we're going to do this. We're going to put CO2 in it. We're going to make it just like, it's really nice. But will I do it again? I might do it one more time because there's a lot of Albarino out there. And if that takes off, then you know, this is how, but if it doesn't work, then you go, that didn't work that great. We've got to get over this stigma around the country, like Texas has wine, Texas, yeah. You know, we had wine grapes before California because of the Spanish missions.
It goes with the fact that there is a lot going on, and so different winemakers are trying a lot of different things. And there is a lot of wine that are great here and that win a lot of medals, not just in Texas, but in California, in France sometimes. But it's just a few wines that don't make the representativeness of the whole area. So it's difficult to say what is the definition of a Texas wine.
This is something that we want it to represent Lubbock and be specifically for Lubbock. Everybody involved with the project is from Lubbock. Every type of beer that you're going to have at this spot has come out of Tim's head and made with Tim's hands. So that's something that I think is neat. You're not getting something that's just been spit out of a machine somewhere else, you know. I think it's really cool whenever you drive down the street, you're going to be able to look through these windows and see all of our tanks. If you drive by on a brew day, you're going to see me and Tim in there making beer, you know. I think the city's ready for it, ready for a spot like this. And it's a new idea that Lubbock's not necessarily familiar with. I think a lot of people think it's still just a bar. So I think it's something that you're going to get probably a lot more interest from the local group because it's a Lubbock beer and not just a new national chain of something for them to try. So it kind of gives them that sense of community. So this will be, basically there's two sections here. So this first section will be all seating area. So that door we just walked through will be the main entrance from the street. That door where you can see where it's boarded up, that'll be the main entrance from the lobby. And then we'll have seating here and here, kind of this L shape. Just put in the bar top and it'll be ready next week, but we'll have a concrete bar top, which we're real excited about. It'll look kind of this cool industrial. And then the rest of the space is for Tim to work in. So we're excited. It's coming together super quick, and these guys are doing a great job. We're just ready to get to work and start making beer for everybody. So I grew up in Sundown, Texas, which is on the other side of Levelland. It's a town of 1,000 people. And then moved to Lubbock, went to school at Tech, and met my wife. And then we got a job and moved off to Raleigh, North Carolina, and worked there for 3 years. And we got exposed to the craft beer scene. And it was such a cool thing because we'd walk in and there'd be families there. There's people of like every race. I mean, nobody's, couples, single people, college age, older couples. I mean, it's just this, it was this really, this a snapshot of the community. And I was thinking about basically my future and what I wanted to do long term, and especially financially, as far as if I wanted to stay at my current job forever, which if I had, it would have been great. But I just kind of got to a point where I was wondering if that's what I wanted to do forever. So as we went to a couple of these breweries, I was like, this is something that I thought would work in Lubbock. So I started working on the business plan, and I told my wife, because my wife asked me at one point, do you want to open a brewery or do you want to open a Lubbock brewery? And I only wanted to open a Lubbock brewery. I didn't want to open a brewery in Colorado or in Raleigh, North Carolina, because I wasn't as invested into that area as I am here. I quit my job and she quit her job, and we packed everything up, and we actually got our whole house packed in a day, and we were just wildly naive, thinking, this is going to be 3-4 months, and we're going to be up and running, and we're going to have a brewery, and we're going to be making money. And of course we can find funding because it's a great idea, and who wouldn't want to fund us, because breweries work everywhere. So we moved back, and it becomes pretty apparent pretty quickly that we're not going to get funding within like 3 months. And I made a couple of business plans and got stuff and got quotes and went and looked at a bunch of different spots. So at one point in time, to get that big giant business plan, I go to the Small Business Development Center in town. I walk in and I sit down, and I tell the guy what I want to do. And I can remember he said, and I have it written down in my notes, that he goes, well, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to give you about a 5% chance of this ever working. So he goes, I can go ahead and help you make your business plan if you want, but I'm telling you right now, it'll never work. And that was kind of a common theme, I would say, was trying to get funding, is a lot of just, feel like you're hitting brick walls over and over again. So I think those 4 months turned into 2 years really quick. Then we got a surprise because we found out we were having a baby. Once we found out we were having a baby, I thought, okay, well, I need to get something more steady. Then my buddy introduced me to the general manager for the West Table here in town, and said that they were looking to expand and they might be interested in doing a brewery, something like that. So at that point, I had already started looking for the jobs, and I'd pretty much given up on it. So I was like, what's the harm in it? So I went and met with him, and he was pretty interested, and he actually had already met Tim through the RIM program at Texas Tech. So it was funny because it was nice to have somebody flip through the business plan and then see Tim's name and be like, oh, wow, yeah, we're interested for sure because we know Tim. And before it was just, they would shut it and hand it back.
So my name's Tim Hardy. I'm the head brewer here at the Brewery LBK. I got started back whenever I was a kid. My dad took up home brewing as a hobby, and I was just kind of always around and helping him with that. And then I think like a typical college student, I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do. And then my dad came along eventually and asked if I wanted to go to Germany and learn how to brew beer kind of on a professional level. And that's really hard to say no to. So we went over there. We went to Chicago and Munich to learn that, and came back and are excited to bring beer to Lubbock and share it with people. We were also trying to open up a brewery, but ran into some issues with the city as far as, and the fire marshal as far as fire hydrants and permitting and things like that. And it's just been really slow getting off the ground. And this one's been much quicker in that regard, even though it hasn't. I'm sure Robert disagrees, and it seems like it's taken forever.
So we've been working on this together now I wrote the business plan 2.5 years ago, and it was probably right at 2 years since you and I started trying to do this together. I can't remember if it was right before we moved back or right when we moved back, but I sent out some emails. So I emailed Tim at Yellow House. I'm like, hey, we're moving back. We're trying to open a brewery. I would love to get to meet with you guys, pick your brains about permitting, what you had to deal with the city. And he kind of told me about how they were still in the process of getting water and getting stuff started, but he gave me a tour of their home brew shop and touched base with Tim like another 2 times or something like that. And I think he said, I don't know if Tim was half joking about it or not, but I was pretty sure he said something like, well, if you need a brewer, then let me know. And I in fact needed a brewer. So, because I like I said, I wanted to open the business, but I didn't, I think part of being successful in anything is knowing your limitations as well, or letting people who know what they're doing do it, So I wasn't going to try to read a book on how to brew and then try to open a brewery off of it, I've put in a couple of requests for beers for him to make, just because that's the kind of beers I like. But as far as how to make them, I can't really tell him because I just don't know. So it makes it a little easier.
Is it going up at all?
Do it.
Where are we at?
154.
Still.
Yeah. See, that's what I do. I just tell him, he asks what number's on the screen, and I read it out to him. or I try to carry heavy things for them, stuff like that.
Keeps me from having to do it. 155, okay. It actually is going up. So this is kind of where the process starts. This is the grain mill. So you put the barley, the wheat, everything like that in through here, and it crushes it to a certain point where you don't want to just completely obliterate it and make flour, but you want to maintain some of the husk to help you have like a filter bed later in the process whenever you're rinsing the grain. So basically these two tanks right here, this is the cold water tank, and it'll actually be hooked up to the glycol system to keep the water at a cool temperature to help us cool it down later in the process. And then this is the hot liquor tank, which is about twice the size of all the other tanks, but it will keep our water at about 163 degrees, 168, depending on what it is. This kettle is called the mash lauter. This is where the water gets mixed with the grain and everything like that. It'll, depending on what we're brewing, you're basically just making a barley tea. By manipulating different temperatures with the grain and stuff like that, you can activate different enzymes, and it's what provides different types of body, different alcohol levels depending on what grains you're using. And then after it's sat there for the amount of time that it needs to at the different temperatures, we'll pump some more water over as it's actually being pumped over into the boil kettle. And all that's doing is making sure that you're rinsing all of the sugar that you've just created out of the grain and not wasting any of your money, basically. Any sugar that gets left over here is just money that's kind of going down the drain. After it's over here, you bring it up to a boil. This is where the hops and any kind of spices, if maybe it's like a wit beer or something like that, if you're using any kind of coriander or anything, all of that will go into the boil. And then we'll pump it over here to one of these, which are our conicals. They're also fitted with the glycol just to help keep them, because maintaining your constant temperature here is pretty much one of the most important parts of the process. And then, so once it's over here, once it's full and at the correct temperature, we add the yeast and it sits for 7 to 10, 14 days. And that's whenever the alcohol is actually created. It's the yeast eats all of the sugar that we just created and turns it into alcohol and CO2. And so after it's carbonated, we'll pump it down there to that, where it goes into the keg, and we'll have cold storage and everything down there. And it'll either come back up here to the keg system that we'll have set up in the tap room, or hopefully eventually be distributed out into the town to different bars and stuff like that. It's at the same time super exciting and super frustrating, mainly because I see the equipment and I know, I mean, there's no turning back at this point, but at the same time I see the equipment and want to come brew tomorrow. And it's just kind of, it's you wait for so long and you're so close that it's just kind of sitting there chomping at the bit.
Like every time you hit like a milestone, you feel a little bit better about stuff. Yeah. Like just getting the water hooked up or turning on the stuff and seeing that it works. Like the electricity works on it, and getting the lights and getting the tables and chairs. Like you hit all these little milestones, it makes you feel a little bit better about it. But yeah, and we still got to order ingredients, and that takes a week to get in, but we'll time it out. Hopefully, to where we can just, as soon as it's ready to go, we'll start making beer. So now basically, we've got family that lives in southeast Kansas, and my sister-in-law is on the like economic development for the county, and so she just called me and said that they'd had a meeting and they were throwing around ideas that they could do for the county, and a brewery came up I think she said in like 2 meetings a brewery came up like 4 times, right? So then she's like, well, I know a guy who knows things about breweries. So I loaded up some beer from Tim, and I went up there and met with my sister-in-law, met with the economic development point of contact there, and met with a couple of people who live in the county and own a couple of businesses. Gave them some beer, basically told them, like, look, this is what we'd like to do. We'd like to do a production brewery, have a small tap room, have some outside seating, because there's no outside seating at all in that town. Basically saying, like, what we'd be looking for is, you know, some people to invest where we can give you a return on your investment, but let us have the full creative control over it, and kind of let us run with it, because we've already got experience now with the actual setup process. So we kind of know what to do and in what order and how to be efficient with it. And out of that little meeting we had, it looks like we're going to get approved for a loan and a grant. So it's looking up, and you know, we're excited to be part of this kind of new opportunity. And there's nothing set in stone yet, but it's already got kind of more traction than we had for the first 2.5 years trying to do it in Lubbock. Like, I'm not griping about like Lubbock as a town, but just far as like I had one banker, like I brought in the business plan, and I think he said word for word was like, do people even drink beer? Do that many people drink beer? And that's what they said. And when you get to that point of trying to convince someone that your idea is a good idea, they're already against it. So we're excited. In a couple of weeks, we'll have a pretty good idea if it's a realistic thing or not. And we'll kind of go from there.
One night be sure to follow 24 Frames on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for stories, full episodes, and up-to-date information on all things 24 Frames, a production of Texas Tech Public Media.